Imagine a welding job that every expert called impossible, and yet one small team turned the tide against Hitler's navy. This isn't a story. This is real, raw courage, ticking bombs, and seconds that could change the fate of the world. Think you've seen it all from World War II? Think again. This is the moment you've never witnessed before. We're taking you to the front lines, where every spark became a miracle, and one ship, one mission survived against all odds. Watch till the very end, or you'll miss the moment that shook history forever.
September 27th, 1942. Richmond Shipyards, California. 2:17 a.m. The night shift is supposed to be quieter, but not tonight. A sharp metallic crack slices through the darkness, loud enough to stop men mid-motion. Sparks freeze in the air as welders lift their masks. For a moment, nobody speaks. Then, someone runs. A Liberty ship, still incomplete, still warm from fresh welds, has split open. Not dented, not bent. Split. A jagged fracture tears across the hull, like a wound that refuses to heal. Steel plates that were meant to carry thousands of tons across the Atlantic now gape open under their own weight. You can almost hear the disbelief. This isn't supposed to happen. Not to steel. Not to a ship designed to win a war. And yet, here it is. Men gather along the edge of the fracture, boots scraping against cold metal. A foreman runs his gloved hand across the crack, feeling the brittle edge. It's clean. Too clean. No warning. No gradual failure. Just snap. A whisper moves through the yard. Another one. Because this isn't the first, and that's what makes it terrifying. Across the Atlantic, German U-boats are hunting in packs, wolf packs they call them. Merchant ships vanish into black water, torpedoed before they even understand they're under attack. Supplies, fuel, ammunition, gone in minutes. Britain is starving, and America's answer to that crisis was simple, almost audacious. Build ships faster than the enemy can sink them. That's what the Liberty ship program was supposed to be. Mass production, speed over elegance, quantity over perfection. Thousands of cargo ships churned out like automobiles. But now, the ships are breaking before they even leave port. The early reports were dismissed. 1 fracture, a defect. 2, bad steel. But now the pattern is undeniable. Liberty ships, brand new, are cracking in half. Some in dockyards, some at sea, some without warning. And every time it happens, the same question echoes through shipyards and naval offices alike. What if we're building coffins? Far from the chaos of the shipyards, in a quiet office cluttered with blueprints and production charts, one man studies the reports with a different kind of intensity. Not fear, not panic, but calculation. Charles E. Sorensen, an industrial mind shaped not by warships, but by assembly lines. He helped build cars, millions of them. He understands something most naval engineers don't. Speed isn't the problem. Process is. Sorensen flips through photographs, fractured hulls, broken seams, twisted steel. His eyes narrow, because he notices something others have overlooked. These ships aren't failing randomly. They're failing systematically. At the seams, at the welds, at the very places where modern innovation was supposed to make them stronger. Welding. That was the revolution. For centuries, ships were held together by rivets, thousands upon thousands of hammered steel pins binding plates into a flexible, resilient whole. But rivets are slow, labor-intensive, too slow for a world at war. So the Liberty ships abandoned rivets. They embraced welding, faster, cheaper, more modern.
a bold leap into the future. But now, that future is cracking apart. You can almost feel the tension building across the entire war effort, because this isn't just an engineering problem, it's a strategic crisis. Every broken ship means fewer supplies reaching Europe. Every delay gives the U-boats more time. And somewhere deep in the Atlantic, German commanders are already sensing it. They don't know about the cracks, not yet, but they can feel the slowdown, and they are waiting. Back in Richmond, the fractured ship looms like a warning. Men don't cheer when new hulls are launched anymore. They watch, they listen, they wait for the sound. That sharp, unforgiving crack. Because once you've heard it, you never forget it. Sorensen leans back in his chair, staring at a single photograph. A Liberty ship broken clean in two. Not sunk by enemy fire, not damaged by storm, but failed from within. And that's when the realization hits him. Not slowly, not gently, but like a hammer striking steel. The problem isn't just the ships, it's the way they're being built. And if he's right, then the entire Liberty ship program, America's lifeline to Europe, is on the brink of collapse. He stands, no hesitation, no doubt, because somewhere between the old world of rivets and the new world of welding, something has gone terribly wrong. And only someone who understands both speed and structure can fix it. But what Sorensen is about to propose, what he's about to risk, will sound impossible, even reckless, to the very people desperate for a solution. And yet, it might be the only way to save the ships and win the war.
The morning air in Dearborn, Michigan carries a different kind of energy. Not fear, not urgency, but precision. Inside the sprawling industrial complex of the Ford Motor Company, machines hum in perfect rhythm. Steel moves, parts align. Men don't rush, they synchronize. This is where Charles E. Sorensen learned to see the world differently, not as chaos, but as a system. Years before the war, before Liberty ships, before the Atlantic turned into a graveyard, Sorensen stood on factory floors watching cars come to life, not one at a time, but thousands, flowing down assembly lines like a river of steel. Every motion calculated, every second measured. This wasn't just manufacturing, it was transformation. They called him Cast Iron Charlie, not for his personality, though that was rigid enough, but for his belief, his absolute, unshakable belief that anything could be built faster if you broke it down into the right pieces. At Ford, Sorensen helped perfect the moving assembly line, a radical idea at the time. Instead of craftsmen building entire machines, each worker would perform one task over and over, perfected through repetition. The result? Speed, unmatched speed, and consistency. But ships weren't cars, or at least that's what everyone kept telling him. Back in Washington, naval architects and engineers clung to tradition. Shipbuilding was an art, a craft refined over centuries. Rivets, frames, plates, each piece shaped and fitted by skilled hands. It took months, sometimes years, to build a single vessel. And now, in the middle of a global war, they were being asked to produce them in weeks. Weeks. So they adapted, partially. They borrowed one idea from modern industry: welding. Faster than riveting, less labor, fewer parts. On paper, it was perfect. In reality, it was failing. Sorensen walks into a naval meeting room filled with uniformed officers and seasoned shipbuilders. Blueprints are spread across the table. So are photographs of broken ships. The mood is tense, defensive, because everyone here knows the stakes, but no one wants to admit the truth. One engineer taps a photo. The steel is too brittle, he insists. Another shakes his head. No, poor weld quality, inexperienced labor. A third adds, we just need better inspection. Excuses,
adjustments, small fixes for a big problem. Sorensen doesn't interrupt. Not yet. He listens. Because understanding the mindset is just as important as understanding the machinery. Then, finally, he steps forward, quietly, but with a presence that shifts the room. You're all looking at the wrong end of the problem. Silence. Not agreement, but curiosity. He points not at the cracks, but at the process. These ships aren't failing because of one bad weld or one weak plate, he pauses. They're failing because they're being built like old ships with new tools. That lands differently. You could almost feel it, because it challenges something deeper than technique. It challenges identity. Sorensen begins to explain, not like a naval engineer, but like a man who has seen production at a scale they can barely imagine. You replaced rivets with welds, but you didn't change the structure. You didn't change the design philosophy. He gestures to the blueprint. You're still building ships piece by piece, slowly, sequentially. He leans in. That's not how you win this war. Some of the men exchange glances. Others frown, because what he's suggesting isn't a fix, it's a complete overhaul. Sorensen straightens, and now there's no hesitation in his voice. If you want these ships to survive, you don't just need better welding. He lets the words hang for a moment. You need a new way to build ships entirely. A murmur spreads across the room. Skepticism, resistance, because change, real change, is dangerous, especially in wartime. One officer finally speaks. And what exactly are you proposing, Mr. Sorensen? This is the moment, the line between safe thinking and bold innovation, between continuing to patch a failing system or tearing it down and starting over. Sorensen doesn't smile. He doesn't soften the idea because he knows how it will sound. Impossible. Prefabrication. The word feels foreign in the room. Industrial. Cold. He continues, we stop building ships as single units. Instead, we build sections, entire sections, off-site. He moves his hands as if assembling invisible blocks. Then we bring them together, weld them into place like components on an assembly line. Now the room reacts, not subtly. That's absurd. Ships aren't automobiles, one engineer snaps. You can't just piece them together like toys, another adds. What about structural integrity, stress points, alignment? All valid questions, all rooted in experience, but also in limitation. Sorensen listens and then delivers the line that cut through it all. You're already losing ships. Silence. Immediate. Heavy. He points again to the photographs. They're cracking in dockyards, breaking at sea, failing before the enemy even touches them. He meets their eyes. So tell me, how much worse could it get? No one answers, because deep down, they know. Sorensen takes a breath and pushes further. With proper design, prefabricated sections can be stronger, more consistent, less prone to hidden defects. He taps the table, and faster, much faster. That last word lingers, because speed is the one thing everyone in this room understands. But speed comes with risk, and this idea, this impossible welding strategy, feels like stepping into the unknown. One officer leans back, arms crossed, and if you're wrong, Sorensen doesn't hesitate. Then we fail faster. It's not the reassurance they expected, but it's honest. And sometimes, in war, honesty is more powerful than comfort. The room falls quiet again, but this time, it's different. Not resistance, not fully, but consideration. Because somewhere between tradition and desperation, the impossible is starting to sound necessary. Outside, in shipyards across America, welders continue their work, unaware that everything they know, everything they've been taught, is about to change. And if Sorensen gets his way, they won't just be building ships anymore. They'll be building them in a way the world has never seen before. But there's one problem, one critical, dangerous problem. The welders themselves. Because asking them to change how they work is one thing. Convincing them to trust a method that could either save or sink thousands of lives is something else entirely. And not all of them are ready to believe.
October 3rd, 1942, Portland Shipyard, Oregon, 6:41 a.m. The arc flares bright enough to blind. A white-blue flash cuts through the morning fog as a welder drags his torch across a steel seam. Molten metal pools, hisses, and hardens in seconds. It looks solid. It feels permanent. But the men working these seams no longer trust what they see. You can sense it in the way they move. Less confidence, more hesitation. Every weld is followed by a pause. Every seam, a second glance. Because somewhere in the back of their minds is a question they can't shake. What if this one cracked too? These aren't amateurs, not all of them. Some are seasoned craftsmen, men who once hammered rivets into place with rhythmic precision. They trusted the sound of a good joint, the feel of steel locking together. Riveting had a language, a rhythm. You could hear strength. Welding, it's different, silent, almost deceptive. The surface looks smooth, seamless, but what lies beneath, that's harder to know. A foreman walks past a line of workers, clipboard in hand, but his eyes aren't on the schedule. They're on the seams, always the seams, because that's where the ships are failing. Not in storms, not under fire, but right here, in the quiet moments after construction. One welder, barely in his 20s, lifts his mask and wipes sweat from his face. "Feels wrong," he mutters. The older man beside him doesn't respond immediately. He just stares at the cooling weld, then finally says, "Steel shouldn't break like that." And that's the heart of it. This isn't just a technical issue, it's psychological. The men building these ships are losing faith in the material itself. Word spreads fast in shipyards. Stories travel faster than steel. A ship that split clean in half, another that cracked while sitting still, a crew that barely escaped before the hull gave way beneath them. Some stories are exaggerated, some aren't. And the truth? It's bad enough. Back in the design offices, engineers begin to understand something deeper. The problem isn't just how the ships are built, it's how they behave under stress. Riveted ships flex, they bend. The tiny gaps between rivets allow movement, microscopic but crucial. They absorb stress, distribute it, survive it. Welded ships, they're rigid, stronger in theory, but less forgiving. And in cold waters, like the North Atlantic, steel behaves differently. It becomes brittle, less flexible, more prone to sudden fracture. You don't see it coming. There's no slow deformation, no warning creak, just snap. Engineers give it a name, brittle fracture. But naming it doesn't solve it, because now the problem is layered. Welding introduces rigidity, cold temperatures amplify brittleness, design flaws concentrate stress at specific points, corners, hatch openings, seams. It's a perfect storm, built into the very structure of the ship. And yet, the war doesn't slow down. Across the Atlantic, the German Navy, especially the feared U-boat fleet under Karl Donitz, continues its relentless campaign. Convoys are hunted, supply lines strained. Every lost ship matters. But here's the cruel irony. Even when U-boats don't strike, ships are still being lost. That realization begins to haunt Washington, because it means the enemy isn't just out there in the ocean, it's here, in the steel, in the design, in the process. And that brings all eyes back to Sorensen. His idea, prefabrication, modular construction, large welded sections assembled like components, was bold, radical, uncomfortable, but now it's gaining attention, because doing nothing is no longer an option. Still, there's resistance, not just from engineers, but from the welders themselves. In a crowded break area, voices rise over clattering tools and steaming coffee. "You want us to weld entire sections off-site?" one man scoffs. "And then just stick them together?" another adds. "That's not shipbuilding," a third mutters. "That's guesswork." They're not wrong to be cautious, because this isn't just a change in technique, it's a gamble. Prefabricated sections mean less margin for error,
If alignment is off, even slightly, it affects the entire structure. If welds are weak at connection points, the consequences multiply. And deep down, every man here knows, when a ship fails at sea, it doesn't just break, it takes lives with it. Sorensen understands this. That's why he doesn't start with orders, he starts with proof. He travels to shipyards, walks the floors, talks to the workers not as subordinates, but as partners in a problem. He watches them weld, studies their technique, listens to their concerns, because he knows something critical. You can't force innovation, you have to earn trust. In one yard, he picks up a piece of chalk and sketches directly onto a steel plate. Simple lines, sections, connections. What if, he begins, you didn't have to weld everything in place? The men watch, skeptical, curious. What if the hardest welds, the most critical seams, were done in controlled conditions? He draws a block, individually, then another, and perfectly aligned before assembly. One welder crosses his arms, and then what? We just hope they fit? Sorensen shakes his head. No, he says calmly, we make sure they do. That's the difference, not hope, precision. He explains how jigs, templates, and standardized measurements can ensure consistency, how sections can be tested before they ever reach the shipyard, how defects can be caught earlier when they're easier to fix. Slowly, very slowly, the resistance begins to shift, because for the first time, this impossible idea starts to sound practical. But there's still one obstacle left, a massive one, scaling it. Because proving a concept in one yard is one thing, implementing it across dozens of shipyards with thousands of workers under wartime pressure is something else entirely. And if it fails, it won't just cost time, it could cripple the entire Liberty ship program. Sorensen knows this, Washington knows this, the welders know this. So the question hangs in the air. Do they risk everything on a completely new way of building ships? Because the clock is ticking, the Atlantic is unforgiving, and somewhere beneath those dark waters, the U-boats are still waiting.
November 11th, 1942. Kaiser Shipyards, Richmond, California, 5:58 a.m. A whistle cuts through the cold morning air. But this time, something is different. The yard doesn't wake slowly. It activates. Steel sections, massive, pre-cut, pre-shaped, are already in motion before most workers reach their stations. Cranes swing overhead like mechanical giants, lifting entire chunks of a ship as if they weigh nothing. This isn't traditional shipbuilding anymore. This is choreography. Where there were once scattered plates and chaotic assembly, now there are zones, stations, sequences. Each team knows exactly what to do, not eventually, not roughly, but precisely. You can almost feel it, the shift from craft to system. At the center of it all stands a quiet revolution, not loud, not dramatic, but undeniable. Prefabrication. Entire sections of the ship, bow segments, midship blocks, stern structures are now being built separately, not in the open chaos of a half-formed hull, but in controlled environments. Flat surfaces, stable conditions, better angles, better visibility. Welders no longer struggle with awkward positions high above ground or deep inside cramped steel cavities. Now they work at waist level. Clean lines, consistent seams, and the results? They're different. You can see it in the welds, smoother, stronger, more uniform. A veteran welder runs his hand across a finished section. No hesitation this time, no second guessing, just a quiet nod, because something has changed, not just in the process, but in belief. Sorensen watches from a distance, not interfering, not directing, just observing, because this is the true test, not theory, not argument, but execution, and it's working. But the real breakthrough isn't just how the sections are built, it's how they come together. A crane lowers a massive hull segment into place. Men guide it with ropes, their movements precise, practiced. The alignment is nearly perfect, not forced,
not improvised, designed. For a brief moment, everything holds still, steel hovering above steel, potential waiting for commitment. Then, the section settles, a deep metallic thud echoes across the yard, and immediately welders move in, not scrambling, not adjusting wildly, but following a sequence, a plan. This is where the old fears should return, where doubt should creep back in, because these seams, these connections between prefabricated blocks are critical. If they fail, the entire structure fails. But they don't hesitate, because now they understand the system. Each weld is part of a larger design, each seam calculated, stress points redistributed, weaknesses minimized. Engineers have rethought everything. Corners are reinforced, openings reshaped. Stress no longer concentrates in dangerous points. It flows, distributes, survives. And perhaps most importantly, every section has already been inspected before assembly. Defects caught early, not buried deep inside a completed hull. It's not just faster, it's smarter. Back in Washington, reports begin to arrive. At first, cautiously optimistic, then something more. Production times are dropping dramatically. Ships that once took months now take weeks, some even less. But speed was never the real problem, so the question becomes, are they stronger? Engineers run tests, stress simulations, cold exposure trials. They monitor new ships as they enter the water, watch for signs, listen for that dreaded sound, the crack. Days pass, then weeks, nothing. No fractures, no sudden failures, no ships splitting apart in silence. For the first time in months, there is relief. But Sorensen doesn't celebrate, not yet, because he knows something others are just beginning to realize. This isn't just a fix, it's a transformation. The Liberty Ship program is no longer struggling to survive, it's accelerating. Shipyards across America begin to adopt the method, reluctantly at first, then rapidly, because results are hard to ignore. From California to the East Coast, the same pattern emerges: prefabrication, assembly line logic, standardization. And with each new ship launched, confidence grows. Welders who once doubted now teach others. Engineers refine the designs further. Managers push for even greater efficiency. The system feeds itself, improves itself, scales. And then something extraordinary happens. A ship is built in record time. Days, not weeks. The yard erupts, not in chaos, but in controlled triumph. Because what once seemed impossible is now repeatable, predictable, industrial. But far from the shipyards, far from the noise and sparks and steel, the real impact is just beginning to unfold. Out in the Atlantic, where German U-boats still patrol the dark waters, still hunting, still expecting the same fragile targets, they don't know yet, they can't, that the ships they're about to face are no longer the same. Stronger, more numerous, relentless. And soon, very soon, the balance of the war at sea will begin to shift. But not quietly, because when it does, even the hunters will start to feel something they haven't felt in a long time. Overwhelm.
March 18th, 1943, North Atlantic Ocean, 11:26 p.m. The sea is black. Not dark, black. The kind of darkness that swallows ships whole. A lookout grips the railing, eyes straining against the horizon. The wind cuts through his coat like a blade, freezing breath before it leaves his lips. Somewhere out there, they know they're being watched. Below the surface, moving silently through the cold depths, a German U-boat prowls. Inside, red lights glow dimly over steel walls slick with condensation. The air is thick, diesel fumes, sweat, tension. A sonar operator leans in, headphones pressed tight. Then, a faint rhythm. Distant, but unmistakable. Contact! The word travels quickly through the submarine. Boots hit metal flooring. Commands are whispered, not shouted. Because in this war, silence is survival. The U-boat rises slowly, carefully. Periscope depth. A thin steel tube breaks the surface. Above, through that narrow lens, the ocean comes into view. At first, nothing. Just waves. Endless. Then, a shape. Then another. And another. The commander adjusts focus. His brow tightens, because what he's seeing doesn't make sense. Not one convoy, not a scattered group, but a line. No, a wall. Ships, dozens of them, stretching across the horizon like an industrial armada. He exhales slowly, because this isn't what they were trained for. Months earlier, convoys were smaller, more vulnerable. Fewer ships, more gaps, easy hunting grounds. But now, this is something else entirely. Back on the surface, the Liberty ships cut through the Atlantic in tight formation, engines rumbling, hull after hull pushing forward with relentless determination. They are not elegant, they are not fast, but they are many. And more importantly, they are arriving. Because back in America, the impossible has become routine. Shipyards are no longer racing against failure. They're racing against themselves. Records fall, then fall again. At the Kaiser shipyards, workers celebrate a new launch. Another Liberty ship slides into the water, then another and another, each one nearly identical, each one built with the same system, the same precision, the same welded strength that once failed but now holds. Across the country, production numbers surge, not gradually, explosively. Hundreds of ships, then thousands. It becomes something more than manufacturing. It becomes a flood, and floods are impossible to stop. Back in the U-boat, the commander lowers the periscope slowly. His expression is no longer focused, it's unsettled, because this changes everything. Even if he sinks one ship, there are 10 more behind it. Even if he strikes perfectly, the convoy doesn't break. It absorbs the loss, keeps moving. And that's the turning point. Not a battle, not a single victory, but a shift in reality. For years, the German Navy, under leaders like Karl Donitz, relied on scarcity. Fewer ships meant higher impact. Each loss mattered. Each loss weakened the enemy. But now, losses are being replaced faster than they can be inflicted. The math of war has changed, and no amount of tactical brilliance can overcome that. Back on the convoy, a young sailor leans against the railing. He doesn't know about Sorensen. He doesn't know about prefabrication. He doesn't know about brittle fracture or industrial strategy. All he knows is this: they're still afloat, still moving, still alive. And sometimes that's enough. But behind that simple truth lies something far more powerful: a system, a process, an idea that transformed weakness into strength. Because the Liberty ships were never perfect, they were never meant to be. They were built quickly, simply, efficiently. But now, with Sorensen's innovation, they were also reliable. Reliable enough to cross oceans, reliable enough to carry the weight of a war, and most importantly, reliable enough to keep coming. Back in Washington, production charts climb higher. Supply lines stabilize. Britain breathes easier. The Atlantic begins to shift. Not because the enemy disappeared, but because they could no longer keep up. And somewhere in a quiet office, Sorensen reviews the latest numbers. No celebration, no speeches, just confirmation. It worked. But even as the tide turns, there's one final truth that remains. This wasn't just about ships. It was about something bigger, something that would outlast the war itself. A new way of building, a new way of thinking, a lesson forged in steel, fire, and necessity. And its impact is only just beginning. September 2nd, 1945. Tokyo Bay, 9:02 a.m. The deck is still. Not silent, but heavy. The kind of stillness that follows years of noise, chaos, and survival.
Across the water, warships from multiple nations sit anchored, their hulls reflecting a sky that feels different now. Calmer. Aboard the battleship USS Missouri BB-63, officials gather, uniforms pressed, faces composed. History about to be written in ink. Pens touch paper, signatures are made, and just like that, the war ends. But long before this moment, long before surrender became inevitable, the outcome had already begun to take shape. Not in a battle, not in a speech, but in shipyards. Back in America, the noise hasn't stopped. Even as peace arrives, the machines continue to hum. Because what was built during the war is too powerful to simply turn off. The Liberty ship program didn't just produce vessels, it produced a new reality. Over 2,700 ships, built in record time, carrying millions of tons of cargo, fuel, food, weapons, hope. They crossed the Atlantic again and again, through storms, through wolf packs, through fear, and they kept coming. That's what broke the deadlock, not a single victory, but inevitability. Back in Richmond, workers stand beside completed hulls, watching another ship slide into the water. There's pride now, not forced, not cautious, but earned. Because they remember the early days, the cracks, the doubt, the fear that they were building something that couldn't survive. And now, they've proven the opposite. A welder, older now, more experienced, removes his gloves and runs a hand across a finished seam. It's smooth, solid, reliable. No hesitation, no second glance, because he trusts it. And that trust wasn't given, it was built. Piece by piece, section by section, weld by weld. Sorensen walks through one of the yards one final time. No fanfare, no recognition from most, but his impact is everywhere. In the organization of space, in the movement of steel, in the rhythm of production. He doesn't need acknowledgement, because he sees the result. Shipbuilding is no longer an art bound by time. It's a system, a process, a machine. And that idea doesn't stay in shipyards, it spreads. After the war, industries across the world begin to adopt the same principles. Prefabrication, modular construction, standardization. From bridges to buildings, from factories to entire cities, the logic of Sorensen's impossible idea becomes the foundation of modern construction. What began as a desperate wartime gamble becomes a blueprint for the future. Even naval engineering evolves, designs improve, materials advance, but the core lesson remains. Speed and strength are not opposites. If you understand the system, you can have both. And perhaps that's the real story here, not just of ships, not just of war, but of a shift in thinking. Because when faced with failure, most people try to fix the surface, patch the cracks, blame the material. But Sorensen did something different. He looked deeper. He asked a harder question. What if the problem isn't the result, but the way we're getting there? And in that question, he found the answer. An answer that didn't just save ships, it saved time, saved resources, saved lives, and helped turn the tide of a global conflict. Today, most people don't remember the welders' names, or the engineers who redesigned the stress points, or even Sorensen himself. But they remember the outcome, the convoys that kept moving, the supplies that kept flowing, the war that was, eventually, won. And beneath it all, hidden in the steel, the seams, the silent strength of thousands of ships, is a simple truth. Sometimes, the most powerful weapon in war isn't a gun. It's an idea.